Mr. President, back home in Illinois, there is one item of news when it comes to Washington, D.C. When or if Donald Trump is going to send in the troops. In June, President Trump deployed the military against American citizens when he sent National Guard troops and 700 active duty Marines in Los Angeles in an attempt to crush protests against his administration's cruel immigration raids. Last month, the president took the unwarranted step of federalizing Washington, D.C. police force and sending thousands of National Guardsmen to patrol our nation's capital. For months now, President Trump has been looking for any excuse to send National Guard troops and active duty forces into American communities. And over the past few weeks, he has boasted that, quote, Chicago will be next. Let me be clear. This would be yet another dangerous, illegal, and unconstitutional abuse of power by President Donald Trump. The president claims his actions are meant to drive down crime and restore order, but all they have done is create a political spectacle, political theater. He ignores the reality that violent crime is down in the District of Columbia and in Chicago, and he ignores the fact that under our Constitution, the power to maintain law and order belongs to the states. That doesn't matter to Donald Trump. Only thing that matters to him are the optics, continuing to push the limits of our Constitution and the rule of law as he abuses his office. Using the military to occupy an American city in the absence of an emergency politicizes the institution, erodes civilian control of the armed forces, and places unnecessary burdens on service members, families, and employers. There are also troubling reports that federal law enforcement officers could operate out of the Naval Station Great Lakes, where the Navy trains thousands of new recruits a year. We are so proud of the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. Every single member of the United States Navy on the enlisted side goes through basic training in our state in the Great Lakes Naval Training Station. My brother, who was a volunteer serving in the Navy in the Korean War, went through that training in his day. It is a magnificent facility, and over the time that I've served in Congress, in the House and the Senate, it's been my honor to make sure that it's the very best training center in the world. Supporting law enforcement is not the core mission of the United States Navy or the National Guard, and it distracts our troops from preparing to respond to real threats from our adversaries around the world. We were just notified recently that there have been secret plans underway for a long period of time. The Pentagon has been developing plans for military deployment for weeks. The plans reportedly include several options, including mobilizing thousands of National Guard troops this month to restore law and order, so to speak, in areas where they're cracking down on crime, homelessness, and undocumented immigration. But in most instances, legal and constitutional instances, the use of federalized troops or the use of federal troops requires the approval and consent of the governor of the state. That is not the case, certainly, in Illinois. It also takes a financial toll on our readiness. We're going to start considering the National Defense Authorization Act this evening here in the United States Senate. It's an important bill, one of the most important, and it has a history of always being passed every single year. I hope we can maintain that kind of commitment. But that bill is passed and popular and bipartisan because it does something that is critical. It authorizes the funding for the troops that defend our nation. We work long and hard on it. I'm not a member of that committee, but I know they spend hours in debate on each and every provision of the bill, then come to the floor and are subject many times to amendments on the floor. It takes a week or sometimes two or more to get it done, but it's that important. Why do we spend so much time? To make sure that our military has the money that they need to keep America safe, our first responsibility. And now we have this prospect that even if we pass this bill, that some other agencies of this government, for some other political reason, in this case, massive deportation, are going to be using the Department of Defense funds. I offered an amendment in the Appropriations Committee where I serve that said if any other agency of government takes money away from the Department of Defense for another purpose, it has to be reimbursed. If we are going to stand by our men and women in uniform and make sure that they're adequately financed, we cannot allow these raids that are being considered by the Trump administration. For example, the cost of Donald Trump's deployment of troops to Los Angeles was estimated at $134 million. And some experts calculate the mission in District of Columbia cost the Department of Defense and taxpayers $1 million a day. $1 million a day. While the National Guard is meant to serve American communities in true emergencies, like pandemics and natural disasters, what is it doing in D.C. at the president's request? Patrolling neighborhoods for political theater, picking up trash and spreading mulch. Give me a break. These men and women are being trained to defend our country. They're being used by this president for political purposes in the District of Columbia. In Chicago, crime rates may be unacceptably high, and I don't doubt that in some categories, but they have been on a steady decline for years, and we are already pursuing successful community-based strategies to deter crime. We're reaching out to the most vulnerable members of our communities, directly and personally, working with trusted and trained leaders who understand the impact that trauma can have on communities. We can work together, but it doesn't mean that Donald Trump shoves it down our throats. We want to cooperate with him. We have programs that he failed to fund in this budget cycle that we believe are critical for the maintenance of the diminishment of these criminal experiences. This is being accomplished through community-based violence intervention and prevention, which represents a historic federal investment in programs designed to help prevent and reduce violent crime. But these programs have been cut by the Trump administration. The initiative supports evidence-based violence intervention and prevention based on partnerships. It combats crime by collecting data, identifying trends, developing strategies, and sharing these practices. Ask professional law enforcement, and they will tell you in virtually every conversation on the subject, you can't arrest your way out of a crime wave. You've got to analyze the basic causes of crime and what to do about it. Of course, dangerous people should be arrested and should pay the price for their wrongdoing. But a strategy that reduces violent crime over any long period of time takes more than that. Replacing these efforts with troops not trained for urban policing risk alienating residents, destabilizing neighborhoods, and harming the National Guard's reputation. And I tell you, over the years, I've come to be a big fan of the National Guard. They're there when we need them. We shouldn't overuse them. We shouldn't abuse them. We shouldn't put them in jobs they're not trained for. That's exactly what the Trump administration is doing in the District of Columbia and threatening to do in Illinois. And incidentally, there's one common fact that belies any objectivity in this effort. You would think if the president were setting out to eliminate crime across America, he could find many examples in red states and blue states, states that supported him and states that didn't. All he's found are the areas that were voting for Joseph Biden in the election in 2020. And those states are the state of California, the state of Illinois, District of Columbia. Now he's threatening to move into Maryland. So if he's going after crime, why is he ignoring the states of Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee, or Texas? Why? Because they voted for him for president. He doesn't see crime in those states, and there's just as much, if not more, as there is in the state of Illinois, and yet he focuses attention only on blue states. All of these states that I mentioned have violent crime rates, high violent crime rates, but President Trump doesn't target them because they're led by Republican officials. That's it. It's a political decision. Trump's power grab sets a precedent that any president could invoke to to deploy troops anywhere without an actual emergency. He was called to task by a judge in California on that just this week, and I'm sure that would be contested. He's reinforcing a pattern of targeting large cities with significant Black and Latino populations, undermining trust between law enforcement and the community. The founders of this nation understood that an unchecked power to turn the military on American people themselves poses a grave threat to democracy and individual liberty. Trump's decision to deploy the military in American cities is more fitting for an authoritarian regime than the democracy that our nation's founding fathers fought for. These tactics are all smoke and mirrors to distract from the real issues facing us. Trump is hoping the American people will forget about his so-called big, beautiful budget that rips away health care and food aid from millions across America, all to give tax breaks to the wealthiest, or forget how his reckless tariff policies are increasing the cost on everyday goods and essentials that working people rely on, or forget about the Epstein cover-up being orchestrated by this White House. Well, America won't forget, and will continue to hold Donald Trump's feet to the fire where it counts. As a ranking member of Senate Judiciary and the senator from the state of Illinois, I will not sit idly by while this president tramples over the Constitution. I will use every tool at my disposal to protect our constitutional system of checks and balances and individual liberties that define us as Americans, from Los Angeles to Chicago to the District of Columbia and everywhere in between. We will continue to put pressure on this administration to explain to the American people why we would waste millions of dollars appropriated for the defense of this country on a political stunt by this president that applies only to blue states that went for Joe Biden in the 2020 election. The bottom line is the American people want to be safe in their homes and their neighborhoods and safe as a nation. This strategy by Donald Trump is not going to achieve that goal. Mr. President, I yield the floor.